Today we're in week 2 of our series called Habits. This series has been shaped not just by the scriptures, but by a few books that I want to share with you. If you're like, hey, I want to dive even further in, learn more about habits. I see how important these are. There's a few books. The first is Atomic Habits. This has taught me so much about kind of really getting into the nitty gritty of how to make something a habit in your life. Encourage you to read that. The Common Rule is another book. All of our staff currently is reading through The Common Rule. It's a book that teaches us how to have formative habits that increase our love for God and each other. And then the last book is Celebration of Discipline. It's a Christian classic by Richard Foster, and it teaches so much about habits. Here's why habits are important. This year, people will make resolutions. They'll say, this year, what I want to do is I want to become this kind of person. And so I'm going to make this resolution. And what we heard last week is that 92% of people that make resolutions will never accomplish their resolution. That's discouraging, right? In part, it's that we've had the wrong focus. Maybe the focus shouldn't necessarily be on the resolution. Now, goals aren't bad things. Set goals for you and your family. We're not saying it's bad. But in order to become the people that we truly have been called to be, maybe it's not in goal setting, maybe it's in habits. Now, what are habits? I gave you this definition last week. It's programmed actions that are repeated over and over. Programmed actions. Today, I want to give you a stat that's a little mind-blowing. Today, if you're an average person with a smartphone, you will touch your smartphone, are you ready for this? 2,617 times. If you're an average person with a smartphone, you will touch your phone 2,617 times today. Have you noticed when you're at the stoplight, what's your habit? All right, what's going on here? Just responding there. When you're bored at your house, what's your habit? When you wake up in the morning, your alarm clock goes off on your phone, what's your habit? 2,617 times. That's a habit. And do you realize you don't have to give much thought to it? You kind of just default and you just do that action. What about driving home from work? I used this example last week. You realize you don't have to use a lot of mental energy into like, okay, I need to turn down this street and down this street. Matter of fact, you can be thinking about something completely different and make your way home just fine. Why? It's a habit. Matter of fact, whenever we function in habit, what's happening is the deepest part of our brain is activated. And it's almost like a default automated system that happens so that you can think about other things in the middle of your habit. Now, here's what we also learned last week. 40% of our life is habit. 40%. 40% of our lives is just the default. We don't really give a whole lot of thought. It's almost unconscious. We just pick up the phone. We just drive home. We just get ready in the mornings. We just do this in the evening. We just eat this. 40% of our lives is consumed in habits. And so we said this year, if we want to become the people that God's called us to be, let's focus on things like habits that form and shape us. And so we said last week, there's 3 core Christian habits. So if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, there's 3 habits that all of us should have. Now, if you're not a Christian, I love that you're here today. Just like sit and investigate, hear what the scriptures have to say. We hope that you see Jesus in a profoundly different way today. But if you call yourself a Christian, there's 3 things that should be inward focused habits. And that's going to be prayer, scripture, and fasting. And prayer today is going to get our attention. So we're going to start in the Gospel of Mark. We'll be in chapter 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to read just a 24-hour period in the life of Jesus. If we're talking about habits, I think one of the best places to start is looking at the life of Jesus, taking just a snapshot of what does a day in the life of Jesus look like so that you and I can learn a little bit. So we're going to read an entire 24-hour period of Jesus' life. There's going to be lots that happen. Take note of exactly what happens in the life of Jesus in the snapshot. We'll start in verse 21 of Mark chapter 1. And they is Jesus and his first 4 disciples. And they went into Capernaum. And immediately on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. And immediately there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. And they were all amazed, so that they questioned amongst themselves, saying, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." And at once his fame spread everywhere throughout all the surrounding region of Galilee. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve him. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. And they found him and said to him, "Everyone's looking for you." And he said to them, "Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out." And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. There's a lot that happened in Jesus' life. If you think your life is busy, here's a great snapshot of Jesus' life. So he gets up, it's a Sabbath, it's a Saturday, and he goes to the synagogue. That's kind of like their version of a church. He shows up there and he worships with the people of God. By the way, when you look at the rhythms of Jesus' life, the habits, one of the primary habits that we see weekly with Jesus is he went and gathered with the people of God in worship. By the way, what happens on Sundays, do you realize how different it is than the rest of the week? When else do you gather with the people of God, sing praises to God, look at the scriptures together? There's something unique and sacred about this moment right now. Never neglect this. Jesus certainly did not. It's part of his weekly habits. He gathered with the people of God. And he didn't just sit on the sidelines. No, what Jesus did was he actually got up in the synagogue, and guess what he did? He began to teach. And they're like, the way that Jesus is teaching is profoundly different than the way old man rabbi has always taught us, and all these other rabbis have taught us. They teach a different way. I mean, they're almost teaching and pointing you to the authority of God, but now Jesus comes in here and he's acting as he is the authority. It's like all this is his words and his commandments. It's different. And then he has a little exorcism in the service. Praise God, I've never had to teach and do an exorcism in the middle of a service. There's a guy with an unclean spirit who comes up. Jesus performs a little exorcism, cast out the unclean spirit. Then they go over to Simon and Andrew's house. They're going to spend some time together in the house. He finds out that Simon's mother-in-law is ill, which, by the way, that's a good thing to do, guys. If your mother-in-law is ill, bring her before Jesus. I know some of you would not do that. My mother-in-law's in here. I would certainly tell Jesus if you were sick and he came over to the house. So he's like, "Hey, my mother-in-law's sick." Jesus heals the mother-in-law. She begins to serve them. And then the fame of Jesus from casting out this demon and from healing Peter's mother, his fame's spreading. And so all the people are coming to the house. It says the sun was going down and the city was gathering, beating down the door saying, "Jesus, heal us. Jesus, cast out this unclean spirit." The fame of Jesus is great. We don't know how late this episode went that night, but we do know it was after sundown and the whole city was gathered. It was pretty late. And then we read verse 35. He rose early. what did he do? He rose early, very early, it says. The next morning, he went to a desolate place. This means like an uninhabited place, a place where he could have solitude and quiet. And what did he do? He prayed. The other disciples are back at the house, and then they wake up and they're like, hey, wait, where's Jesus? All the people of the city are beginning to gather yet again around the house. And everybody's going, where's Jesus? Where's Jesus? So they go on this frantic search for Jesus. And you can sense just a little frustration in the voice of the disciples. I mean, they make it to Jesus and they're like, hey, everyone was looking for you. Let's kind of decode this. Jesus, what the heck are you doing? You know that you can heal these people and they're waiting for you, and you're over here by yourself praying. I mean, there's work that's got to be done. Hey, this is in part one of the things I love about the incarnation, God coming down, putting on flesh and blood. If you are busy and stressed out and your schedule feels really full, God gets that. He understands that. Why? Jesus' schedule was really, really full. If it feels like your to-do list is like never ending, and you end one day and it's not done, and the next morning you wake up and there it is yet again, Jesus knows what that feels like. He knows, he gets it. And this is a huge teaching moment for them. Because he goes, hey, I still have a really busy schedule. We've got to go and we've got to preach the good news to all these other towns. I mean, the list of demands is still there. And yet he thought it necessary to pray. That there was something about priorities and prayer, that prayer and solitude with the Father took precedence over the healing and the people gathering around the house. And we need to hear this. Prayer always took a priority in Jesus' ministry. When you look at the scope of Jesus' life, it didn't matter what season, didn't matter the circumstances, it didn't matter what was happening or occurring. Prayer was always a vital piece, a critical component of his life. Jesus, whenever he had to make a significant decision, guess what he did? He prayed. Before choosing the 12 disciples, those that would walk most closely with him, guess what he did? He spent all night in prayer. As a matter of fact, that's the longest recorded prayer we have of Jesus. Before a huge decision, he spent time communing with the Father, seeking the Father and the Father's will. Do you have important decisions looming? Take note, Jesus prayed. He prayed before meals. I know that's something we do, and we do kind of all right most of the time. But he had thousands of people gathered, just a few loaves of bread, a couple fish. He broke it and thanked the Father for the meal. Jesus prayed with others. The transfiguration, the closest three, Peter, James, and John. He goes, I want to spend some special time with you. And so he invited them up to the mountain and they prayed together. They experienced God in a very profound way that day. He prayed when he needed God to intervene. His friend Lazarus dies. All the people are gathered in front of the tomb. He's already been wrapped up and placed inside the tomb. And Jesus prays. He prayed in difficult moments of life. Right? We find him hours before he faces the cross. He's in the garden and he's on his knees and he's praying fervently. We even find him on the cross. In excruciating physical pain, what is he doing? He's praying. So hear this. Jesus had a habit of prayer. And his responsibilities and demands are a little bit greater than my responsibility and demands or your responsibilities and demands. When I look at all Jesus had going on in his life, what was demanded of him, the task that had been given to him of going and saving the world from sin, healing, casting out demons, it puts a little perspective in my schedule of just simply trying to get the kids to soccer practice on time. And yet I don't seem to find the time to pray. I've learned this in the busyness of the American schedule. One of the very first things to fall apart in busy seasons of life is prayer. And yet it's one of these core habits that Christians should be participating in. We should be people of prayer. And so we said, okay, if that's who we've been called to be, people of prayer, we look to the example of Jesus, then how do we become people of prayer? And I think one of the key components is habits. We want to be a people that have a prayer habit of, get this, kneeling in prayer 3 times a day. Now, you're like, all right, show me where that is in the Bible. Listen, there's no explicit command to get down on your knees and pray 3 times a day. That's not in there. But we do have a precedence that's set by other godly people. Daniel in the Old Testament. Daniel had literally a kingdom and king that wanted his worship, established laws that said you can't pray and worship Yahweh, pray and worship me. And yet, what do we see Daniel do? And I want to read to you Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, that's the law that says you've got to pray to me. You can't pray to Yahweh. He went to his house where he had windows in the upper chamber opened towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. Apparently, it was a habit in the life of Daniel, this godly, faithful man, that 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening, he would get down on his knees and he would commune with the Father, seek the Father. It was just a part of his life. Ancient Jews and even Jews today do the same thing. The Christian faith is rooted in the Old Testament and the faith of the Jews, and they still do the same thing. Morning prayers, afternoon and evening prayers. I think there's a precedence that's set for us to be people who do the same. And I think creating a habit of praying 3 times a day would actually help form us into people who pray, or prayerful people. So the morning, let's look at the morning a little bit. There was a survey done by Desiring God, and they surveyed 8,000 Christians. And here's what they found. 54% of Christians admit to checking a smartphone within minutes of waking up. 73% of Christians said that they check their phones before any kind of spiritual discipline. Hi, my name is Brandon, and I have a problem. Because I've been there. I know it's like you set the alarm on your phone, you wake up, and before you know it, it's just that habit. Like I'm checking my work email, I'm checking my personal email, I'm checking the news, I'm checking social media. And before you know it, like 15, 20 minutes has passed, and you're like, I should have gotten up 15 or 20 minutes ago. But now I'm in a scramble, I'm hurried, and the day is off and running. See, I think praying the very first thing in the morning is what we call a keystone habit. What's a keystone habit? Have you ever seen a bunch of dominoes set up? If you push that first one over and it falls, the rest begin to fall. I think this is what morning prayers do. They begin to set the tone and trajectory of our day. Then what if the first thing we did was we were on our knees and we were proclaiming that, God, I'm dependent on you today. Lord, I can't make it without you. Lord, I have this upcoming and this person, I need you to intervene here. I mean, what if we were people that actually set the tone of the day the moment we woke up on our knees? That's a keystone habit. That resets and reframes the entire day for us. Now, I did something really weird this week. You ready for this? I got on Amazon and I ordered this thing. You may not know what I'm talking about. It's called an alarm clock. They were way back in the 80s and 90s. And basically, they track time, and you can set alarms, and you don't have to use your phone. Just Google it after you leave here today. You'll know what I'm talking about. And I took my phone, you ready for this? And I moved it out of my bedroom. So today, the alarm clock goes off. I've got to hit snooze one time. So I hit snooze one time, and then I'm up. And the next thing I do, I don't have anywhere else to go but to my knees. See, I think for me, I had to set this habit, and I had to create an environment that produced this kind of habit. It was favorable for me not getting on my phone and checking, but first dropping to my knees and praying to God. And that sets the tone. Next, I think the reason why Jews prayed in the middle of the day is, if you notice, like when we're at work or at school, like there's things that kind of derail us. Like work's not going as I wanted it to go. I'm not accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. I'm dealing with these hard people, hard to work with people. And things start derailing a little bit. And I reach like lunchtime. And I need to refocus and recenter myself. In his book, The Common Rule, he says this, Justin Early: somewhere between noon and 2, I began to realize that all the things I had hoped were getting done are not going to get done. I realized that somebody is going to have to be disappointed. I began to look down the barrel of the afternoon. I see I'm not good enough. I can't do it. Does it sound familiar? And this is where we drop to our knees and we remind ourselves of who we are in Christ. We refocus and recenter. What if at your job or office, even if it was 1 minute, you drop to your knees and you refocus? You reestablish what you established in the morning, just right there at work, at school. You found some place that I could do that. And then evening comes, right? And if you're like me, we have 4 kids, very demanding schedules. You get to the end of the night and you're exhausted, tired, maybe you're a little sad too. And so as human beings, what we do is we try to cope with being tired, being exhausted, maybe being sad or frustrated. We cope with, maybe I should just have a drink, take off the edge. Maybe I just need to mindlessly scroll on social media. I just need a break. Maybe we binge on Netflix. We're just trying to cope with the demands of life. But what if we recaptured that and we got back down on our knees and we prayed? And I think this, for me, is a time of 2 things. The first is confession of sin. I'm like, my goodness, Lord, I didn't handle that well. I didn't walk with you well. This is where I struggled. This is where I failed as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a pastor. This is where I failed you. And then I start to rest in his grace and in his mercy. You know, sleep is a gift from God. If you don't rest in the mercy and grace of God, you'll find difficulty sleeping. The Bible says actually that he gives sleep to those that he loves. It's a gift. So I confess, but then I also say, thank you that all this is covered. I'm free of this. You have saved me and forgiven me. I also noticed that this is a great part of my day to offer up prayers of gratitude. God, thank you for today. Thank you for the great things that happened. Thank you that I made it through. Thank you for my kids. Thank you for my marriage. Thank you for all the grace. What if this was the habit of us? Mornings, we're dropping on our knees first thing and we're praying prayers of dependence. I need you to break through. We refocus in the middle of the day, saying, God, that hasn't changed since the morning. I still need you. Center me on you. And then in the evening, we didn't cope in unhealthy ways. No, we ran to the Father. With all of our struggles, all of our frustrations, all of our brokenness, I think what that would do is that would begin to form us into people of prayer. We're focused on the daily habits so that we can become people of prayer. I read this quote to you last week and it still rings true. I want you to know this. If you want this year to be a season of change and growth, here's the key. Growth is a slow, it's not overnight, secret, unspectacular affair. And there's nothing sexy about waking up and dropping to your knees. There's nothing really sexy about dropping on your knees midday. But yet, if I create this habit, it actually gets me to a place where I depend on Him for everything.